even from the earliest years of parenting, though, there's sort of stress or concerns about, is my child rolling over in time? Oh my God, what happens if they're not walking or they're not talking? Like, what will this mean for their development? How will they be able to get to school?
Hi, this is Danae. I'm the founder of Simple Families. Simple Families is an online community for parents who are seeking a simpler, more intentional life. In this show, we focus on minimalism with kids, positive parenting, family wellness, and decreasing the mental load. My perspectives are based in my firsthand experience raising kids, but also rooted in my PhD in child development. So you're going to hear conversations that are based in research, but more importantly, real life. Thanks for joining us. Hi there, thanks so much for tuning in. That voice that you heard in the intro is Dr. Dana Dorfman. Dana is a mental health professional. She has 30 years of clinical practice treating children, adolescents, parents, and adults. She's also the author of a brand new book, When Worry Works. The title of this book immediately grabbed my attention. As Dana says, anxiety is an unavoidable part of parenting. As a parent of a teenager and a young adult, she knows this firsthand. And what Dana works to do is to show us how our unique parenting anxiety patterns can be turned into an advantage instead of a liability. If you want to get in touch with Dana or get the link to her book, go to simplefamilies.com/episode 341. I hope you enjoy this chat. Hi, Dana. How are you?
Hi, fine. How are you?
Good. I am glad to have you here on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
Yeah, I got a message a month or so ago from your publicist about your upcoming book called When Worry Works. And I didn't even need to read anything else. I just said this. We need to talk about this.
Uh,
Because the title, to me at least, it says so much because, as someone with high functioning anxiety, I do find that anxiety can really help support me in some ways. But it's this double-edged sword. So tell us a little bit about yourself and about your book.
sure. So I am thrilled to hear that the title appealed to you because that was something that had been um, we revised many times over the years. But I am a psychotherapist in New York City, and I have been working with children and teenagers and parents and families for about 30 years, just about 30 years. And I am also a mom. I have a 17-year-old and a 21-year-old. So, and then for the past 8 years or so, in addition to my practice, I have been working on and doing research and really digging in deep to anxiety and the topic of anxiety and achievement anxiety specifically. So, which is why I wrote the book.
Yeah. So talk to me a little bit about what you mean by parent achievement anxiety.
So, parent achievement anxiety is any like parents' worries about their kids' future success. So, anything that is obviously achievement related, but even performance related, or any anxieties, concerns, worries, anticipatory fears that parents have about their kids' future success.
And parents who have parent achievement anxiety, who are worried about their kids' future success, does that tend to correlate with other types of anxiety in the parents?
I would say that it does, although anxiety is not always pathological. So, part of anxiety's purpose, it's part of our survival mechanism. It exists within us so that it protects us and signals to us when we detect, or our brain detects, or our system detects any kind of potential threat or danger um, in our midst. and sort of sets off a whole series of physiological responses. And so, because it is a protective mechanism and it is there to help us survive, there's something highly beneficial about anxiety. So, we all have it at some point, and we all have it to survive. We all have it throughout the day. And so a lot of times we perceive it as, or it has been considered to be something that is like quote unquote pathological, but it's not always a pathological function. So if anxiety's purpose is to help protect us, and to help us prepare for the future, if you think about parents' primary purposes, it is to protect their young and to prepare them for the future. So, being a parent is inherently anxiety producing. That's just part of the role. And so I think that all parents and most parents have some element of some concern about their kids' future, sort of how something is going to play out in the future
Mhm.
with their kids. I don't know of a parent who doesn't see their kid or experience their kid doing something, whether it's, oh my God, she's not sharing in the sandbox. I don't want her to grow up and be a selfish person kind of thing, to, oh no, he's not studying right now. What will the future implications be when he gets to high school? So so there's always some element of achievement anxiety, I think, for most parents, but I think that it is absolutely intensified in this generation of parents and in our current culture.
Yeah. Yeah. You tell a story at the beginning of the book about worrying about your son not studying abroad when all of his friends were studying abroad, and
Mhm.
you describe that it consumed your thoughts. You were unable to sleep, feeling sad on his behalf, imagining fear and all that could happen, devising ways to preempt his pain.
Mhm.
And I'm smiling because when I read it, I will be totally honest, I minimized your struggle on this and thinking like,
Mhm.
"Oh my gosh, like that really is not that big of a deal,"
Mhm.
which I think we do to other people when we hear about other people's
Mhm.
anxieties. But then it also made me pause because it's like these situations that maybe in the grand scheme of things are not that big of a deal, we
Mhm.
can wind them up and make them into an enormous deal within our own brains. And it sounds like that's what was happening here for you.
Yes, and just as a disclaimer too, I did say later on, like, I know this is not that big of a deal in the
Right.
scheme of things. I don't want you to think that I was that disproportionate in my
Right.
beliefs.
But
But,
that can happen.
oh, totally, and I can spin myself up about something really minor. Um, and so you're now I was so busy being defensive, I forgot what your question was. Which
I think that I could see myself in that. It was funny though because I could when I was reading this like, wow, like that seems like a small thing to be that have that much anxiety over. But
Mhm.
then we think about all of the ways that that can happen to us and we don't even notice when it's happening and then all of a sudden it's spiraling and getting out of control.
Yes, and by the time that we realize it, we're in it. We are so deep into the rabbit hole that we have ourselves convinced that this degree of worry or this degree of anxiety is actually warranted. Um, and I think that oftentimes it's funny. I was literally just talking to the mother of a toddler this morning who had called in a panic and just wanted like a brief check in before her day began because of an issue that her 2-year-old has been having. And I was very conscious of not minimizing it, but also realizing, like, oh my God, you're gonna see by the time your kids are 21, you're gonna think like, I can't believe you're gonna have forgotten that you ever even made
Right.
this call. But when something is happening to you in the present, it and we are fully consumed in it, and we can, it's like fish swimming in water, like you don't even realize it, and by the time you realize that you have totally spiraled, you have also convinced yourself that the spiral is necessary. So,
Mhm.
the other thing, just with that particular example with my son, who, by the way, which was just so funny because I had just gotten a copy of the book for the first time, and he happened to open it and read that chapter, and so he screenshot it and sent it to his friends in Spain, and we're just like, "Dude, you got cameo in my mom's book about anxiety." And so, which was just so funny. But in that situation too, that was also like when we think about sort of the context of how things or when things are happening, also everyone was so amped up at that point. Everyone felt as if they were on sort of a razor's edge. We were just kind of we were sort of emerging out of COVID, maybe kind of sort of a little bit, but the kids had missed essentially 2 years of school. He had never actually been in high school yet. And then there was all of this hype or pre-junior year hype about, oh my God, are you taking SATs? Is your son taking SATs? All of this stuff. So there was also like all of this background noise that was fueling me,
Hmm.
once again, I'm not saying to justify my anxiety as much as I
Yeah.
think that it's emblematic of how contagious anxiety is and how much our culture and our world impacts it or perpetuates it.
Mm. Yeah, that idea that anxiety is contagious is so important. I think that I've found since becoming a mother that I have a hard time surrounding myself with other anxious people because I do take on so much of their anxiety because of my own tendencies.
Uh-huh.
And it's hard to balance that though. Like I have a lot of friends with anxiety, like a lot of women have anxiety, a lot of men
Uh-huh.
have anxiety, everybody has anxiety. So it's not like I'm going to say like I can't be friends with you anymore, but I have to also check myself constantly.
Yes.
Like if like my kids are climbing up the slide on the playground and some other parent is like, "No, you can't climb up the slide. You're going to get hurt." And I'm actually okay with my kids climbing up the slide and like having to do that self-talk in my brain. Danae, you are okay with your kids climbing up the slide. You do you. And that's not easy when you have somebody else kind of barking orders that run opposite to that thought.
Definitely. I think that that is true, and especially even if you I think about this a lot, the times that I've sat in meetings with a lot of parents. Like even there have been like pre-college meetings that they've held at the school, and you can feel the tension in the room. I mean, every parent is sitting at the edge of their seat or at, very compulsively taking notes, and you feel as if you are not anxious, you feel like you're a weirdo kind of, and it's impossible not to catch it. It's like COVID, and the
Yeah.
other thing, the other phenomenon I think that happens is that is also where our hyper judgment comes from. If somebody is very anxious and we're trying to protect ourselves from it and we can't wear a mask the way we would with COVID, although maybe we should wear anxiety masks, the tendency is to also get very judgy about the other parent. Like a lot of times too, when we're hyper judgmental of someone else, it's sort of to protect ourselves from having to feel that vulnerability or something like, oh, that mother is so overprotective or something. That's really just to protect ourselves from our own anxiety, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Let's pause for a 1-minute word from a sponsor. Our first sponsor for today is Thrive Market. Thrive Market is my go to for all my grocery and household essentials. I love the convenience of getting it all quickly shipped to my doorstep. As a Thrive Market member, I can save money on every single order. I love that it's easy to find some of the brands that I already commonly buy, like Simple Mills, Cliff Bars, Annie's, Bob's Red Mill. It's especially easy to navigate if you have any dietary restrictions. I'm gluten free, and it's really easy to search and find products that I can eat. So join Thrive Market today and get 30% off your first order, plus a free $60 gift. Go to thrivemarket.com/simplefamilies for 30% off your first order, plus a free $60 gift. That's THRIVE market.com/simplefamilies. Thrivemarket.com/simplefamilies. Try it out. I think you're going to love it. You talk in your book a little bit about this idea that we do things to prevent us from needing to worry, like childproofing, for example, right? It's like,
Mhm.
so it's not only does it keep our kids safe, but then it prevents us from worrying. Do you find, at parenting older kids, adolescents, young adults now, that pattern just continued, past childproofing, the pattern to try to, I'm just going to do this better safe than sorry?
Yes, definitely. And I have to stop myself every day. I mean, even as recently as yesterday or Saturday night, my son was going to a basketball game at Madison Square Garden, and it was a Saturday night, and he was leaving, and I had to resist the urge not to say, "Do you have your ticket? Do you not going to wear gloves? It's super cold out." I mean, he's 17 years old, and you
Yeah.
wait, you know which stop it is. I had to keep, like, reminding myself the temptation as he's leaving to even just put in a few extra markers just to protect him was so powerful, and it takes more energy, I think, to resist the urge than to actually it would have been easier in some way for me to just I mean, it would have been easier for me. It would have done more, I think, damage or been more complicated had I actually verbalized it. And there are many times when I don't resist the urge, but it just is so,
Yeah.
yes, it absolutely does. And it just kind of morphs into whatever the developmentally appropriate or seemingly developmentally uh, appropriate kind of challenge is.
Right. Can you talk? I mean, I know there's a lot of parents listening that are like, well, what's the problem with just telling him to wear his gloves? Right. Can you talk a little bit about the negative repercussions of giving all those reminders, reminding to give the ticket, reminding to bring the gloves and the stop, reviewing where the stop is?
Well, I think that there are many messages that get conveyed by virtue of doing that. While our intentions as parents is like, I want to be helpful to you, and I am more experienced than you, and I have done this many more times than you, so I know the drill, and I can offer you like a simplified short list of those things that one does to prepare themselves before they go out. And on some level, there is also something, as much as we think we're being generous of spirit, and maybe we are, and loving our kids, we can't mistake that for we are trying to take care of us, that we don't want to feel the discomfort of the prospect of his experience or their experiencing discomfort. Um, and so there is something also that is I don't want to say selfish, but this is also parents have a very hard time, and I write about this a lot in my book. I maybe not as much, but I've written many other essays and things about this and think about it a lot. Just how much this seeming over parenting that we do, and this seeming what we are couching in, I just love him and want to protect him, is actually also protecting me from having to experience the anxiety, discomfort of the potential of his being uncomfortable. So there is a
Hmm.
self protective component of that, which I think is just I just don't want us to delude ourselves into thinking this is all other oriented. The
Yeah.
other thing is that I think that the latent message of doing that is I'm still the parent. You're just a kid. You don't know what you're doing. I don't think that you know what you're doing. I don't think that you will have the capacity to be able to do it. And you are almost depriving the kid of the opportunity to, I assure you, I have gone to the theater before and forgotten my ticket before it became QR code or
Digital.
something.
Yeah.
Yeah, digital. Thank you. That I have never forgotten a ticket since, after that. And so while we want our kids to learn from our mistakes, human beings don't. And so by my telling my son, which I didn't actually go through this particular exercise, but had I said to him, oh God, I got to the ballet and I had forgotten my ticket, and then I had to call dad and he had to come and bring it, and I missed the whole first scene or whatever, whatever, like, who that's sorry for you, mom, but it's not as if he's going to then learn and then say to his friends, well, my mother had this terrible experience, therefore I don't want to have that terrible experience. So we want for him, that is
Right.
how learning happens, and I don't want him to suffer, and I don't want him to make mistakes. On the other hand, we all know we learn the most from our own mistakes, our own failings, and also he can improve his own system that works for him if he is able to exercise sort of all of these different steps. So there are so many levels of value to not doing that. And if a parent is so compelled to do such a thing, there are also intermediate kind of iterations of this so that you don't have to go like, I don't know, whole hog. You can also say, like the night before, like, I'm just sort of thinking about tomorrow when you're going to the, I didn't know that this next game was going to give me so much material. But, if I were to have said on Friday night or Saturday morning, like, is there anything that you need to have, or what do you think that you're going to need to have, something to even prepare him for the exercise of walking himself through it, which I also didn't have to do. But my son happens to be a much more organized person than me, so it's ironic that I'm having this conversation. But I think that also, so that there are also, because I was going to say that parents sometimes hear this as, well, what am I supposed to do? Like, let them, totally flail, or I'm not going to throw them into the deep end without any kind of a life vest. And this is really just saying, like, there are other steps that you can take to help prepare them for these experiences.
Yes, yes. Can we talk a little bit about the accessibility of parents and how you've seen that changing things in the past? I'll give you an example of this. So, my son, who's in third grade, wanted a smartwatch. And my biggest fear with the smartwatch was all of a sudden I was going to be getting these random texts like, my bus is late. What should I do? Or, there's no toilet paper in the bathroom at school. What should I do? And
Uh-huh.
that he was going to be, rather than accessing other adults, that he was going to be constantly looking to me to solve problems and find the answers.
Hmm.
And I wonder if you've seen this coming up, this idea that parents are kind of filling in all of these opportunities for problem solving that may arise throughout the day by constantly texting and being in touch with their parents.
Yes, 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 yes. I have seen
Okay.
it sort of increase, to such proportional levels. Once again, I'll share just a recent scenario that happened. I have a friend whose son is living back at home with them. He graduated from law school, has his first job as an attorney at a very prestigious firm that he worked very hard to get the job at. And I'm going to apologize to this friend afterward if she listens to this, but I saw her that day. She said that her son they had a cleaning service in their apartment. She was in the office, he was working from home. And the cleaning service was vacuuming outside of his bedroom door. So he texted her to see if there was any way that she could notify the cleaning service not to vacuum. This is such a first world kind of issue, but so that this is somebody who figured out how to pass the bar exam, but didn't know how he would communicate, like, uh, with this person to ask them not to vacuum outside of his door, and wanted her from work to contact the person somehow or other to take care
Right.
of this issue. Once again, my daughter had gone abroad for her a semester junior year, and I had done the same, had the good fortune of having done the same in college. And I remember I had to, back in the day, I had to, I spoke to my parents once a week and really had to wait. I mean, I could speak to her a million times a day, and if she was, and I there is something, something gets lost in the independence of things, when you have your parent that readily accessible. And it is even harder for a parent to then resist the urge not to solve
Mm-hmm.
the problem. You're getting a call that quickly. You're in the middle of a podcast. What are you going to do? Like do some collaborative problem solving, or just give them the answer and get off? So it's also
Right.
just more expedient to just give them the answer. So
Right.
it's really concerns me actually, because I think that it does perpetuate this kind of like hyper dependence and intensifies anxiety. I mean, the more dependent we feel and the more incapable we feel, and the more incompetent we feel, the more anxious we're going to feel.
Right. Yeah. And I think that there's this kind of spiraling effect that comes from this frequency of being in touch, where then, if, and I think it goes both ways, if the child or the parent are used to being able to, at a moment's notice, be in touch with the other one, when that person is out of touch, panic can set in, right? If the person doesn't respond for an hour, right? How that on both ends of the spectrum can really go
Yes,
crazy.
absolutely. It kind of it becomes habituated. So the more accustomed to it we become, the more anxious we become when there is any kind of like departure from that.
And
Yes,
that's
absolutely.
not feeling very healthy, right? That like fear around not being able to constantly be in touch with another person.
Right.
Mm.
Yeah, that on many psychological levels, because part of being able to mature and develop and evolve emotionally is also to be able to tolerate being separate and being able to, we know from psychology, like hold on to the image of somebody or maintain sort of the experience of being with that person even in their absence. So it's almost like, and we call that object constancy, and that capacity is something that we hope that children develop kind of in their very like late toddler year. I mean, they begin to develop it, but we hope that they can even have it accessible to them internally by the time that that they're in grade school. So it's
Mhm.
really concerning when we see, kids in they're in adolescence and late adolescence who are still unable to soothe themselves in the absence of like sort of concrete contact.
Mm, yeah. So, coming off the pandemic, I find that, well, so entering into the pandemic, I had tiny kids. I had a new my son was just mid kindergarten when it all happened, and my daughter was like 3.
Mm.
Now my kids are in first and third grade. And I guess the idea of having achievement anxiety is starting to maybe present itself. Um, but for me, I found that I don't have any of that yet, at least, but I do have anxiety about my
Mm.
kids' mental health. I'm wondering if that is something
Hmm.
that you've experienced, that the worry about their mental health.
I absolutely hear that parents are much more concerned and much more aware of the mental health crisis in our world, and so parents are also much more anxious about it. And while it is terribly unfortunate and concerning that so many kids are in distress, I am slightly hopeful that maybe this will help parents kind of shift their focus a little bit to mental health as opposed to, and not kind of prioritizing achievement over mental health. That we see that emotions and one's psychological being are critical components of their functioning. And so we want to sort of keep that in our parenting formula and keep it as alive as possible. The other thing, just as far as, I'm glad that you're not having achievement anxiety. I think that even from the earliest years of parenting, though, there's sort of stress or concerns about, is my child rolling over in time? Oh my God, what happens if they're not walking or they're not talking? Like, what will this mean for their development? How will they be able to get to school? I spoke to a parent the other day who was very concerned and really actively working on toilet training so that her kid would qualify for preschool. So you can, while it isn't just, academic performance, you can see these milestone achievements where anxiety is percolating for a parent.
Okay, then I lied. I have had achievement anxiety.
Okay. Well, this is its most general kind of
Right.
definition,
Well,
but
developmental achievement anxiety, which I guess I
yes,
haven't yet kind of pivoted into this academic achievement where like I'm really worried about like grades and future
yes.
and that sort of thing. Maybe that is still to come. It's hard to say. But I think I don't know, the mental health piece is important, but it's interesting to hear that perspective of how you feel like maybe we'll pivot a little bit to focusing more on mental health. And actually, I highlighted a sentence in your book. You said, when we see poor performance, our reaction more often than not is to increase the pressure to succeed rather than to address the underlying emotional issues. I think that's,
I wrote that.
yeah, isn't
That's
that
so
smart?
cool. Yes. Oh, I like it.
That was so great because you're right. I mean, that like thinking about how our gut is if our kids are not they're not working up to their potential or they're not getting all A's, whatever it is, we're going to put the pressure on to make them succeed more. But really, that's not necessarily the answer.
No, and you can also see how much emphasis we put on work ethic and being a hard worker and developing
Hmm.
grit and motivation. Like you could sort of see how achievement is also an understandable receptacle for anxiety, that it is something, for which there are concrete markers, there are quantifiable metrics. Emotions are much harder to capture. We don't know necessarily what's going on inside of somebody or what someone is feeling. That feels very amorphous. However,
Hmm.
if a kid is getting certain grades or has a certain placement in their overall class, that gives us some kind of, or so we think or like to believe, it gives us something concrete to hang our hat on or to
Hmm.
um,
Measure our own success.
measure our success and their success. Right. They are
Right.
where they're supposed to be. And we also, most of us value achievement. All of us want our kids to be successful, however we should define it. And so it's understandable then that this would be a tempting place to go as an indicator of how someone is doing.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
it's not always an accurate reflection of that.
Yeah. Yeah. It makes me think about the relief that parents get when their kids are seniors in high school and they got into a good college, right? That, like, my
Yes.
work here is done.
Yes,
But is
and
it?
no, it is not. And yes, it is, and that it's such a I was at a party over the weekend too. I'm glad I've had these experiences to just reflect on, but where a parent of a high school senior was telling a group of other parents, high achieving, loving, well intended parents, that their daughter had been accepted early decision to a prestigious school that she had uh, long aspired to attend, and the whole group was saying congratulations to the mother, and I thought, like, oh, something,
How interesting.
this is not. And as she was talking about it, she was even saying we this, we that, and I was thinking, no, not we, she. Like, this is not, yes, she is your daughter, I
Yeah.
understand that you were proud of her, but this is like, these are these subtle distinctions that I think also intensify and complicate this entire phenomenon, because the messaging, even though it seems like a, I don't know, cavalier statement or something, I think some of the latent messaging in that is, my my success is contingent upon your college acceptance.
Yeah. We're going to pause for a final 2-minute break from today's sponsors. KiwiCo knows a thing or two about delivering moments of discovery through fun, hands on projects. Each month, they deliver super cool science, technology, and art projects for kids. Most recently, my kids enjoyed the marine biology box, and I enjoyed it too. KiwiCo creates opportunities to create something and to learn together, both adults and kids. Cultivate your child's natural creativity and curiosity. They'll explore new worlds and rediscover familiar ones, even without leaving home. I find that KiwiCo boxes are especially great for sick days, and I know most of us have had these recently. KiwiCo does the legwork for you so you can spend quality time tackling projects together. There's no commitment, pause or cancel anytime. So make 2023 a year of discovery with KiwiCo. Get 50% off your first month of any crate line at kiwico.com/simple. That's 50% off your first month at kiwico.com/simple. In the minute that I'm going to be talking to you about Indeed today, 16 hires were made on the website. When you sponsor a job ad on Indeed in the US, you're 3 times more likely to get a hire, according to Indeed data. Finding great talent doesn't have to be a second job. Indeed is the hiring platform where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place. You don't have to spend hours on multiple job sites looking for the right candidates with the right skills. You can do it all with Indeed. With Instant Match, as soon as you sponsor a post, you get a short list of quality candidates whose resumes on Indeed match your job description, and you can invite them to apply right away. Indeed knows that when you're growing your own business, you have to make every dollar count. That's why with Indeed, you only pay for quality applications that match your must-have job requirements. Visit Indeed.com/families to start hiring now. Just go to Indeed.com/families. Indeed.com/families. Terms and conditions apply. Cost per application pricing is not available for everyone. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. Thanks so much for supporting our sponsors. Back to my chat with Deanna. My son forgot to do his homework this weekend. He only has homework on the
Mhm.
weekends. And usually he's very responsible about remembering. But this weekend, for whatever reason, like the backpack didn't even open up. Like we never opened it. Folder never came out. And last night at bedtime, I'm like, oh no, like we didn't do any homework. And he kind of gasped and realized it. But I kind of went through this. So my initial reaction was, I'm going to email your teacher and tell her that you're going to do it tonight, Monday night instead. And then afterwards, I was like, wait, should I have emailed her? Should I have had him email her? Or should I have had him tell her? And we're kind of at that
Mhm.
age where he's perfectly capable of saying those words
Mhm.
himself. And he did. He went to school and did it because I forgot to email her.
Good.
So but I emailed her like halfway through
Mm,
the day. And in my email, I said, we forgot to
mm,
do the homework
mm,
this weekend.
mm,
Right? Which I thought was like just now
mhm,
reflecting on that. I'm working towards shifting that. Like he forgot to do the
mhm,
homework, but maybe there is a we. Like I'm still kind of responsible for the homework too. So that kind of fading
mhm.
of our own responsibility, that's tricky.
Yes, it totally is, and it's not, always I don't want the message to be universally to say "we." I mean, in some way, I guess the 2 of you this is the 3rd grader
Yeah.
that and so there is also sort of this, like, evolving system that the 2 of you are developing, as well as sort of, like, how does he begin to take agency
Mhm.
for his work, but he is only 9, is still very little to start managing one's time and determining how much time is necessary or warranted for an assignment. So it is sort of a gradual kind of disentangling of the we, but
Mhm.
certainly your support is, I'm sure, quite helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, thinking as a parent, the slow handoff, right? And I'm always, for whatever reason, I have this visual in my head of like being a bodybuilder parent, like holding this huge barbell full of weights. And then my
Uh-huh.
child standing there with an empty bar. And like every year, I'm like taking one of my weights and putting it on their barbell
Yes.
and like slowly
Yes.
passing the weight off to them. And that's kind of this
Huh.
visual that sits with me. And
Huh.
and now that he's 9, like he can carry some weights. And like if I don't ever give him any weights, how's he ever going to get stronger, So
It's a wonderful visual. I love a good metaphor. And that's actually, and if you think about, even like, not only are you handing it over to him, and also you're standing by, maybe even spotting him.
yeah.
I think that this is the perfect visual, even for how much responsibility parents always ask me. I don't know how much pressure to put on my kid, and I think that in some way we don't know until you've put the weight on, or he's requested that you do, and then you see the degree of tension. Too much tension will
Mhm.
actually cause an injury, and too quickly. Too little, it's too you're not going to build any strength. That's what the
Yeah.
trainers say anyway, that, like, it just, unless you do a lot of reps.
Right.
And so this way. So there really is, we always want that challenge to be just enough challenge
Hmm.
where you feel as if you can, but you need to give that little bit extra push, challenge,
Right.
whatever.
Just outside of the comfort
And
zone.
thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And
Yeah.
so, but we need tension. We absolutely need tension in order to be able to strengthen, but too much is going to then cause injury.
Hmm.
And as we're getting older, we can't handle as much weight. So it's very good that we're starting to transfer the weight over, you
Yeah.
know.
Well, and you think about the kids that are going off to college with their barbell almost empty because the parents have been doing all the heavy lifting for them.
Mhm.
And then all of a sudden we're just going to like dump it all on them and
Mhm.
they don't, they don't know where to begin. So it has to
Yes.
be kind of the slow process. But I also, for that visual, and sometimes I'll give that visual to clients too. And the kids, I think, can see that, right? This idea that, like, what do you mean I have to put my laundry away? Why do I have to put my laundry away? Nobody
Mhm.
else puts their laundry away, or whatever
Mhm.
it is, chores or taking responsibility for things that I think kids can have a hard time seeing the value in that too. That, like, I'll do that when I'm older. When I move out to my own
Mhm.
house, like
Mhm.
I'll wash the dishes and put things away.
Mhm.
I've been thinking a lot about chores lately. I just interviewed Julie Lythcott-Haims, and
Mhm.
in her book, How to Be an Adult, she talks about the importance of the grind of chores.
Uh-huh.
And that's not something I had ever thought about before. And it's something I've been thinking a lot about. And now my kids are putting their laundry away every single day because I
Uh-huh.
wash laundry every day and I have baskets with their names on it. And they have to put the laundry away before they can have their TV time after school.
Ah.
But it's usually only like two or three things. But it's funny
Uh-huh.
to see them react in the sense that, like, oh my gosh, I just put the laundry away. Where did this come from? Like, it's like
Uh,
this idea that it just magically reappears. And there's
yes.
always, no matter what you do, there's always laundry there. And there will always be laundry there. And that grind of the everyday you do the
Uh-huh.
thing. And I do think we need to start showing our kids a little bit of that grind.
Definitely. And I think also what we can't underestimate in that is also that feeling of competence and mastery. It also feels really good to feel like I can do this. I don't need my mom to do it. Even though
Hmm.
I guess on the surface it seems like, oh, who wants to put away laundry? On the other hand, it does feel good to have your room, cleaned up, or to see the laundry basket empty and feel like, when I started, there were 4 things in there. Now it's done and I've taken it out of my room. And I think sometimes it's useful to even invite kids to do a little bit of reflection on how that feels, not in a, you see, wasn't I right? Like, doesn't it seem much
Right.
better to have an empty laundry basket? But more just kind of, how does that, I don't know, how does that feel to you, or what do you think? Or I'm hesitant to say this because just the other day, my son had gotten his report card and he was really, he just seemed really happy about it. And we don't emphasize grades a lot in our home, but I did say to him, like, oh, you seem really proud of yourself. And he was like, Mom, he said, like, I don't think of it that way. And so he said, nobody thinks that way, like, oh, I'm so proud of myself. And so I said, yeah, but now that I'm saying it, because God forbid I let it go, so I was like,
Yeah.
well, now that I'm saying it though, like, because you seem like you do feel pretty proud of yourself, like, do you? And he was just like, I don't think about whether I'm proud of myself. So now, whatever, when my book arrived the other day, he kept saying, Mom, are you proud of yourself? And I was like, yes, as a matter of fact, I am. And maybe I'm the only person in the world who thinks this way. So now I'm
Right.
just kind of, because I wanted for him to have the experience of just like, what is that feeling of accomplishment? Like, just put a pin in that feeling of
Hmm.
like liking the way I did something. So,
Yeah.
but he really rejected my like corny therapist talk, which is not the first time.
Of course, right?
Right? Rolling their eyes at me.
Yeah. In your book, you talk about parent anxiety reaction types. I thought this was really fascinating.
Uh-huh.
Tell us a little bit about how you developed those and what those are.
So the parent anxiety reaction types, or parts, or what I call them, are 8 different archetypes, and they're kind of a compilation of different cases that I've worked with over the years, and ways that parent anxiety, parent achievement anxiety specifically, has manifested or shown up. And my purpose for developing them was I was very intent on trying not to pathologize anxiety because it is not always pathological, as I said, and also normalizing it. Also, I wanted to encourage parents to really reflect. And a lot of times when we see ourselves in somebody else, it invites for that kind of self reflection. So, this was my effort to encourage that kind of self reflection and to see the different ways that anxiety might be manifesting, even when there are situations when we wouldn't say that we are anxious, but anxiety is at the root or is underlying some of the behaviors that we're engaging in. As a result of that, I was seeing kind of consistent patterns or ways that the achievement anxiety specifically, was manifesting in parents. So I devised 8 different types, which are modeled. I realized retrospectively they align in many ways with our defense mechanisms. We know a lot about defense mechanisms, and there are different kinds of defenses. And defenses, the purpose of defense mechanisms, even though they too get a bad rap, is really to help us manage the intensity of our feelings. So the 8 different parts are there are clairvoyants, shepherds, uh, sculptor, replicator, corrector, avoider, and game show contestants, and crowd pleasers.
I'm
I
impressed.
think that that's
All
all.
off the top of your
Yeah,
head.
you'd think that you'd think I spent 8 years writing this book. You would think I should say them like that, but and each type I tried to kind of clarify that there are certain triggers, certain things that kind of are apt to trigger this particular kind of anxiety. And then I also modeled or identified different ways that the anxiety can both be helpful, so I call them perks of that type, or pitfalls, the ways that actually they could inhibit or derail us from what our intentions actually are. So each type has its particular characteristics, and then has perks, pitfalls, triggers, and then I sort of give tips for each particular type. And there's also I devised afterward, once I was getting really positive response to this, nothing like a positive response to then prompt more of something. But so I devised a quiz, which actually also parents have really enjoyed taking, that kind of help parents identify even more specifically what their type is. We can identify with all the different types. There are parts of all of us in all of the parts, but usually there is a dominant or predominant part.
Yeah. What's the website for that?
It's on my website, which is drdannadorfman.com.
Great. So I was reading over the different types, and the first one in the book listed is the sculptor. Through academics, extracurricular activities, and even therapy, they work to shape their child into a perfectly well rounded product. And that resonated with me because I think that's what I would do if I hadn't done a lot of work.
Mm-hmm.
Like if I hadn't been noticing my own tendencies, I think I would be a sculptor.
Mm-hmm.
But it's funny, I read through all of these and they were all like, no, like this is definitely not the right way to go. Like this isn't how you should do it. And then I got to clairvoyant,
Mm-hmm.
and which is where you identify your child's gifts and talents and believe that that will lead them to future success. And you make decisions that put them on the accelerated course to master their talents. And I got to that one. I'm like, that's the one I am now. There's nothing wrong with that. But it also made me, I was like, well, but the other people who identify with these other things think there's nothing wrong with that. That like the replicators, like it worked for me, it'll work for you. There's nothing wrong with that.
Mm-hmm.
I think that kind of deep identification with one, we're feeling like, because that idea that like it worked for me, it won't work for you, like to me in my mind, no, everybody's different. Like you're
Mm-hmm.
not born a blank slate. Of
Mm-hmm.
course, that's not
Mm-hmm.
correct. But it's just funny how mine is right and all of the other ones are wrong,
Yes, well, of
which I think
course.
that
That goes
that's
without saying.
problematic
Yes.
at its core.
I think that that is also, it's such a natural place to go. I think that all of these are healthy, kind of in the way that we have established how to manage our own anxiety through our lives up until parenthood. They're deeply embedded in us and have worked for us. A lot of times that's why we use them, like being hyper prepared, ahead of time and thinking things through, which is not my type, but I'm thinking of my husband, who we get to the airport 3 hours minimum ahead of time. He, I think, would say, like, well, that's the way I like to do things. Maybe he might even say, like, that's the right way to do it. And for me, that's more anxiety producing. I end up doing it because I do. But my style would actually be, for some reason, I don't like to, I hate waiting. And so I would prefer to waste time at home. And even if I have to be, like on the fast track, running into the airport, that's the preferable style for me. My point, though, is that this is this has worked for him. That is why how he has
Mhm.
established this way of operating, and I guess mine has worked for me too, although it seems less obvious
Mhm.
about it.
Until you miss a plane, and then maybe it's not
Even
working
then, I
anymore.
have missed a plane or two, and I think it's a time management, executive functioning thing, but that's for another episode. But so none of these are wrong at all. It is
Mhm.
just when they are in excess. And it is also supporting, like, however we use our defenses, in the same way that, like, denial is not very good if you're drinking a six pack a day and think that everything is okay. However, if you are not focusing on, oh my God, like I could get hit by a car today, like you need a little bit of denial to get through the day, or that
Mhm.
this is going to be okay. So the defenses can be, also in proportion, are always helpful and highly individual. So none of these are wrong in any
Yeah.
way.
Yeah, no, that's good to remember that, these are just a variety of different types of anxious thinking patterns that we can see ourselves in and notice our own tendencies rather than one being right or wrong necessarily.
Yes.
All right, Dana, thank you. It's been so good talking with you today. Thank you.
Thank you. This was such a pleasure to speak to you, and I so appreciate hearing your own experiences as well. So thank you.
Absolutely. And I'll put the link to your book and your website in the show notes.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening. This has been episode 341. If you want to get in touch with Dana, get the links to her book or any of the things that we talked about, go to simplefamilies.com/episode 341. As always, thanks for tuning in. Please take a minute to leave a rating or review for this show. I appreciate your support. Have a good one.